Imagine a girl who could have anything she desired, except an appetite. Her father owned half of Lagos, her face was on magazine covers, and yet she was starving. Not for food, but for something no money could buy. What could make a billionaire's daughter reject luxury dining and crave a roadside food vendor's jollof fries instead? This is not just a tale, it's a truth coated in spice, hidden in memory, and fried in love. If you love Nigerian stories with rich emotion and real twists, hit that subscribe button now. You won't forget this journey. The Owolabi mansion in Ikoyi stood like a crown in the city's skyline. Golden chandeliers, imported Italian floors, and a kitchen staffed with chefs from France to Thailand. Zara Owolabi, only daughter to Chief Adewale Owolabi, had her food flown in: lobsters from Canada, mushrooms from Japan, truffles from Italy. Yet none of it touched her lips, not for months. Once a lively girl who laughed freely, Zara had become silent, slow, and visibly thinner. Her beauty remained, but the life behind her brown eyes was slowly dimming. Her father, concerned but too busy with government deals and oil contracts, hired the best doctors in the country. They tested her for rare diseases, mental disorders, even spiritual afflictions. Nothing showed up. Every result came back clear. Physically, she was fine. But every meal ended the same, untouched. Sometimes, just the smell of the chef's food made her sick. Her room smelled like lavender and luxury, but even that felt like a prison to her. Nannies watched her closely, maids tried to tempt her with small bites, and chefs begged her to try just a spoon. But Zara's stomach refused. The only person she didn't avoid was Mama Bisi, her childhood nanny, who had served the family for over 20 years. It was Mama Bisi who remembered a time before the billions, when Zara used to sneak away with her late mother on Sundays to eat something humble, something simple, something smoky. And then one Wednesday afternoon, something strange happened. Zara suddenly perked up. With her shawl draped over her shoulders and sunglasses hiding her tired eyes, she tiptoed past the guards, into the backyard, and into a small Toyota driven by the gardener's niece. The car pulled out of the gates, unnoticed, but not by Mama Bisi. Old and wise, Mama Bisi followed from a distance in a kike, her head wrapped, and her suspicion strong. She clutched her handbag tightly, praying silently as she trailed the car through the bustling chaos of Lagos, from the rich calm of Ikoyi to the deafening heartbeat of Yaba. There, between rusted shipping containers and rumbling danfos, stood a food stand like no other. A plain wooden table, a coal pot dancing with fire, and a young woman in worn slippers flipping spicy fries in oil. No signboard, just the scent, the kind of scent that could turn memory into medicine. And on that rickety bench, Zara Owolabi, the pride of a billionaire, sat in silence, scarf pulled back, eyes closed as she ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Her face changed with each bite, her lips glistened with oil and pepper. She wasn't just eating, she was healing. The vendor handed her the fries wrapped in old newspaper, sprinkled with pepper dust and laughter. Nothing about this was ordinary. Nothing about this was explainable, but it was real. Mama Bisi didn't interrupt. She stood in the distance, heartbroken but smiling. She now knew the truth. Zara wasn't hungry for fancy. She was hungry for comfort, for warmth, for a piece of the past that luxury had stolen. When Zara returned that evening, her energy was different. She hummed in the shower, she wrote in her journal, and she slept deeply for the first time in months. The next morning she rejected all food again, until another Wednesday came. The pattern repeated. Every Wednesday she found life again. And the mansion, though full of meals, grew emptier of meaning. But a storm was brewing. One evening, during a grand event at the mansion, where ministers and moguls gathered for a diplomatic dinner, Zara collapsed beside a platter of truffle risotto and roasted duck. Doctors rushed, panic rose, and as the chandelier lights flickered above her unconscious body, she whispered a name, Mama Yola. The guests froze, her father's face drained of color. And in the days that followed, every headline in Nigeria carried the same shocking question. Who is Mama Yola, and why does the billionaire's daughter cry for her? It was the name that rattled every corridor of the Owolabi mansion. Mama Yola, a name unknown to Lagos high society, a name not listed on any guest list, not seen at any fashion gala, not featured in any magazine. And yet, That name left Chief Adewale Owolabi speechless the moment his daughter collapsed at his high-profile banquet, surrounded by kings and oil executives. In that grand hall full of golden plates and crystal glasses, she had called out not for water, not for help, but for Mama Yola. Doctors were summoned again, this time not to check her heart or her blood, but her mind, yet nothing was wrong with her. The only mystery remained. Why would the richest girl in Nigeria cry out for a roadside cook? Behind closed doors, Zara remained silent. She didn't speak to the specialists. She ignored the dietitians. But what she did next shocked her father and his entire inner circle. With trembling hands, she wrote one name on a slip of paper and slid it to Mama Bisi. The next day, a black SUV drove out of the estate, guided by that paper. The driver followed the old nanny's directions until the SUV reached the rugged belly of Yaba, where the air smelled of petrol, roasted plantain, and sweat. People barely noticed the glossy car in the chaos. But there, in her usual spot beside two iron containers, stood the woman whose hands had unknowingly shaken the world of a billionaire. Mama Jola. She wasn't what one would expect. She was young, no more than 23, with a strong jawline, sun-kissed skin, and eyes that looked like they had seen too much for her age. Her hands moved with purpose, flipping fries over the fire, splashing pepper sauce, shaking her small wok in rhythm. Her coal pot hissed as oil popped. The scent was intoxicating, a balance of tomato paste, spice, and smoky magic. When the men in suits stepped out of the SUV and approached her, she didn't flinch. She simply wiped her hands on her wrapper and raised her chin. They delivered the message. "You are requested at the Owolabi estate, immediately." Mama Jola hesitated for a moment, not out of fear, but uncertainty. Then she extinguished her fire, packed her utensils into a wooden box, and tied her kerchief tighter. A few boys from the neighborhood gasped. The billionaire's people are taking her, but no one dared stop it. Back in the mansion, Zara waited in a dark room with only one window open. The air inside was cold, sterile, empty. The jollof vendor walked in without a trace of nervousness. The moment their eyes met, something shifted. Zara didn't say a word, but her eyes flooded with tears. She reached under her bed and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. It was an old plastic fork, slightly melted at the tip, the kind that Mama Jola's mother used to give customers 10 years ago. Zara had kept it since childhood. Back then, before the mansions, before the drivers, her late mother had brought her to Yaba once a month. They'd sit on a plastic bench, their legs covered in red dust, and eat Mama Jola's jollof fries, then cooked by her mother, now deceased. Zara's addiction was not to the food alone, it was to memory. She remembered the laughter, the warmth, the simple joy of sharing one plate. Her mother would always tell her, the richest food is the one made with love, not butter. After her mother died in a helicopter crash, Zara stopped eating. The only time she smiled again was when she found that same jollof vendor years later. Only now, it was the daughter, Mama Jola, who carried the torch. That smoky taste had the exact flavor her mother once called home. Chief Owolabi finally confronted the truth when he entered the room and found his daughter, once pale and dying, sitting upright and finishing an entire plate of peppered jollof fries brought in by Mama Jola herself. At first, he was humiliated, a billionaire defeated by street food, but he saw something deeper. He saw his daughter alive again, laughing, breathing, glowing, something not even the world's top chefs could achieve. The chief made a decision that would shock all of Lagos. The next day, the Owolabi estate held a press conference, not to announce a new skyscraper or oil deal, but to introduce Mama Jola's kitchen, a new food venture fully funded by Chief Owolabi himself. The girl who cooked beside containers was about to become a national brand. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. He didn't just invest in her business. He asked her to move into the estate, to become Zara's personal chef. Not for the sake of food, but for the sake of healing. The media spun the story in 1,000 ways. Some accused her of witchcraft, others called it fate. But none could deny one truth. A billionaire's daughter had been rescued not by medicine, but by the humble hands of a street vendor with coal smoke in her eyes and love in her seasoning. Zara's recovery was swift. Her body filled out. Her laughter returned. She even opened a foundation called Flames of Memory, sponsoring women-owned food businesses across Nigeria. The girl who once had no appetite now fed an entire nation, with one secret ingredient: remembrance. It was the first time the scent of roadside pepper sauce floated through a billionaire's dining hall. The same chandelier-lit space that once echoed with the sound of clinking crystal and untouched silverware was now filled with something different: humble laughter, the hiss of oil, and the earthy aroma of firewood-smoked jollof fries. And at the center of it all, sitting at the head of the table once reserved for diplomats and dignitaries, was Zara Owolabi, alive, radiant, and holding a steaming plate of Mama Jola's magic. News cameras waited outside the gates. Social media couldn't stop buzzing. The billionaire's daughter who rejected luxury now eats with her hands. But inside that mansion, there was no scandal, only healing. Mama Jola had transformed more than just taste buds. She had restored something invisible: peace. Since moving into the estate as Zara's personal chef, she refused to wear the official white kitchen uniform. Instead, she tied her Ankara wrapper the same way she did back in Yaba and cooked with her coal pot in the back garden, refusing to switch to imported stoves or stainless steel ovens. And it worked. Zara thrived. Her health stabilized, her skin glowed again, her voice returned, and with every bite of Mama Jola's fries, the pain of the past melted just a little more. But that didn't mean everything was easy. Some of the mansion's staff whispered behind closed doors. They couldn't understand how a girl from the streets, no culinary degree, no European training, had been allowed to take over the kitchen. The French chef resigned in protest. The house manager called it an embarrassment. But Chief Owolabi, for the first time in his life, didn't listen to profit or pride. He listened to his daughter's heartbeat, and it beat strongest when the scent of smoky tomatoes and pepper filled the air. The bond between Zara and Mama Jola deepened with each passing day. They weren't just employer and cook, they were something far more sacred: sisters of memory. Two women shaped by loss, bonded by flavor, and now rising together in a world neither of them had imagined. One quiet morning, the chief called a private family meeting. There, seated beside his daughter and the once unknown vendor, he made an announcement that would change the course of both families forever. He was naming Zara the ambassador of his new food enterprise, Golden Roots Nigeria, a chain of Afrocentric food courts dedicated to preserving traditional Nigerian recipes with integrity. And at the heart of that empire would be Mama Jola's recipe, not changed, not rebranded, but honored. Mama Jola would be chief culinary director, and her face would be featured on every billboard. From Lagos to Abuja, from Owerri to Port Harcourt, her smoky jollof fries would become a household name. The world would no longer see her as just a roadside girl. She was now a food revolutionary. But there was one condition Zara insisted on: the original stall in Yaba must remain untouched. Zara herself paid to rebuild it, not in gold, not in marble, but in strong wood, with proper shelter, clean seating, and space for other local vendors to sell beside her. A small golden plaque was mounted on the wall. This is where healing began. Crowds began to gather there every week, not just for the taste, but for the story. Mothers brought daughters, fathers brought sons, and everyone who stood in line learned one lesson: sometimes the richest meals come from the humblest pots. As Mama Jola's kitchen expanded, Zara started visiting schools and orphanages, handing out food packs with handwritten notes inside. You are seen, you are loved, never forget your roots. The billionaire's daughter, once pale with rejection, had now become the face of joy, giving, and gratitude. The people rejoiced, even the press softened, and Chief Owolabi, once embarrassed by his daughter's collapse, became her proudest supporter, quoting her in his public speeches. My daughter reminded me that true wealth isn't in what you serve, but in how it makes someone feel. In a country obsessed with status and luxury, Zara and Mama Jola had flipped the script, one plate of fries at a time. But it wasn't just Nigeria watching. An international documentary team flew in from the UK to capture the story. The film, titled Jollof Saved Her, went viral across platforms. Suddenly, global chefs wanted to learn from Mama Jola. Michelin star reviewers came to Nigeria not for caviar, but for her fries, And through it all, Zara stood tall, health restored, spirit healed, mission clear. But something else blossomed quietly behind the scenes. Wealthy air, wafted at her obsession with common food, tried to return into her life. He said, not out of pride, but out of clarity. Because she knew now, any man who couldn't respect her firewood love didn't deserve her golden heart. The sun rose over Lagos with a different warmth that morning, not just from the sky, but from the hearts of the people. A city known for speed and luxury had paused for something rare, a celebration that blended the sacredness of simplicity with the elegance of success. For today, the billionaire's daughter who once refused all food was not just eating, but hosting. And not just hosting, she was marrying. But the most surprising part? It wasn't the wedding gown, nor the guest list of ambassadors and governors. It was the menu. There, on golden printed cards laid across every table at the Owolabi estate, was a single headline in bold red script: Mama Jola's jollof fries, the bride's only request. The crowd buzzed, some gasped, a few smiled knowingly, because by now, her story was legend. They had watched Zara Owolabi fall into despair, reject the world's finest cuisines, and then rise again, restored by firewood and memory. It was only fitting that the food that saved her life would now serve her joy. The guest of honor wasn't the groom, it was Mama Jola. She walked into the wedding venue not with a tray, but with pride. Her wrapper was pressed, her braids tied in gold thread, and her hands, though still stained with the smell of peppers, now wore diamond bangles gifted by Zara herself. She wasn't in the kitchen today. She was at the high table, beside the chief, beside his daughter, not as a cook, but as family. Zara's groom wasn't a billionaire or prince. He was a young documentary filmmaker from Enugu who had first met her while filming Jollof Saved Her for a global audience. He had asked to interview her, and she had fed him instead. As their friendship grew, he never once treated her like a celebrity. He laughed with her over Puff Puff and listened to her speak of childhood joys and food carts, not stock portfolios. He loved her, not despite her scars, but because of them. And so, the girl who had once withered in silk sheets was now glowing in a simple lace gown, dancing barefoot on the grass, surrounded by children she'd once sponsored, and street vendors who now owned food trucks under the Golden Roots banner. The wedding had no champagne fountains or diamond centerpieces. Instead, there were lanterns made by orphans, tablecloths sewn by local tailors, and favors that read, "Flames of Memory," feeding the soul, not just the body. Mama Jola stood to give a speech. Her voice, soft but steady, carried through the crowd like incense. She spoke of her mother, who taught her that food was a form of love. She spoke of the shame she once felt for cooking on the roadside. She remembered the night her coal pot was kicked over by a drunk man, and she wept, thinking her future had burned away. But now she looked out across a sea of faces, richer than she ever imagined, and realized the fire had only just begun. Zara embraced her before the speech ended, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Even the chief, a man once bound by ego, shed a tear as he watched the woman who had brought his daughter back from the edge, now dance with her in joy. By evening, something beautiful happened. Each table was served a plate of Mama Jola's famous jollof fries, not in golden dishes but in traditional wooden bowls, hand-carved by artisans in Kwara. The pepper sauce was extra hot that day, as if reminding everyone that flavor doesn't beg for approval, it demands presence. As people took their first bites, a hush fell over the crowd. Mouths smiled, eyes watered. Even foreign dignitaries dropped their cutlery and used their hands. Something deeper than taste moved in that moment. It was heritage. It was memory. It was Nigeria, unfiltered and alive. Later that night, as lanterns flickered under the stars and laughter carried into the sky, Zara and her new husband stood on a small stage. In her hand wasn't a bouquet, but a single plate of fries. She raised it high and said, "This plate saved me, not because of what's inside, but because of who made it. If I could give every broken person in the world one thing, it wouldn't be money or fame, it would be this, a chance to remember who they truly are." Applause filled the air. The party danced till dawn, Children slept on laps. Mama Jola's coal pot, now retired from the streets, stood as a wedding centerpiece, decorated in gold but untouched, as a symbol of how far one small flame can go. The next morning, newspapers carried the headline, "From street fries to state banquets," how one plate of jollof changed everything. Zara and her husband later opened a culinary foundation across West Africa. Mama Jola became a global ambassador for traditional African cooking, and the original food stand in Yaba remained open every Wednesday, run by her younger cousin, where anyone, rich or poor, could still buy a plate for 500 euros. And so, the story that began with rejection ended in abundance. The billionaire's daughter, who once refused every dish, had found joy in the humblest plate. And Nigeria learned something deeper that day.